Hi and welcome back to the channel. I'm Gooder and today we're taking a look at 2020 blockbuster Wonder Woman 1984. Well, it was supposed to be a 2020 release, but thanks to the ongoing global you-know-what, basically no one went out to see it at the cinema when it was released in the UK in December of last year. The film has now come to streaming services in the UK, and it went straight to that in the US. So, is the film worth the 15 quid or so to stream? Does it suffer from lacking the full cinema screen experience? And how is it as a follow-up to Diana's first solo outing, which was largely positively received? The answer is a mixed bag. It opens with a flashback sequence to Diana as a young girl competing in some sort of Amazonian games. Desperate to win, and after making a costly error, she takes a shortcut to find herself disqualified at the lowest moment for not covering the full course. The upshot being that her mother and mentor tell her that she's still much to learn and that her time will come. That's a fair enough development of some characterization for our lead. However, as a whole, this intro sequence is a strange way to start the film. As a sequence, it runs for roughly 10 minutes, which seems over long for the purpose of illustrating the aforementioned characterization. Throughout it, I was given to wonder why Diana was competing against much older competitors, what the exact rules of the contest were, and why this was the starting point for the film. It's not helped by the fact that since this is all presented as a friendly contest, there is no inherent excitement in the sequence because there is no danger, no real tension. A shorter version of this, I think, would have worked placed further into the film rather than as our starting point. It does, though, somewhat encapsulate the film as a whole. At over 2.5 hours, the film is overlong, and I can't help but think a good trim would help it out a lot. From there, we're taken forward in time to 1984, where Diana works in a museum and pines for her lost boyfriend of a few days 70 years later. We get a sort of second opening sequence as Diana, in full Wonder Woman guise, goes about carrying out a number of what you'd call minor acts of heroism around an almost comedic depiction of the 1980s. It's a world full of garish colours and outfits, though this fades as the film progresses, and aside from the odd visual reference to the 80s setting, like Kirsten Wiig's gym getup, the setting really isn't a focus for the film. So you do wonder why they chose the time period, since there's no reason why the film couldn't have been set in pretty much any other decade. For something that was such a large part of the marketing, including being in the actual title, it's strange that the film really does nothing with it. During this section, we get an example of one of the other issues with the film. It's a small thing, but it does bring you out of it. And that is when Diana is doing her hero thing, and she's moving with speed or jumping big distances. The effects work makes it all feel very weightless and unreal. It's a step back from the work done in the other films. It does crop up a number of times during the action sequences, which is a shame, as there are some neat touches in the choreography of that action. The real misstep in the film, however, is its core theme, I feel. There is an idea here around the fact that you can't have everything that you want, and that there is a value in working in earning what you have instead of just being given it. It is mostly centered around the film's MacGuffin washing stone, that old concept of the monkey paw that grants you your wish but at a cost. For example, Diana wishes for Steve to be back in her life, but this comes at the cost of her powers, her ability to protect others, which is something which is key to who she is as a person. Meanwhile, Kirsten Wiig's Barbara wishes to be a glamorous and strong, but that comes at the price of her core good nature. Most intriguingly, we find out that main villain Maxwell Lord's quest for riches and fame is rooted in deep anxiety and a need to feel validated. It's a fascinating angle to the character, and it's a shame that it only comes up in the final moments of the film, as it helps us to understand his motivations. This leaves the relationship between Diana and Steve as the main carrier of the theme that should be the film's heart. But unfortunately, the chemistry between Gadot and Pine doesn't really ring true. Apart, they both have charisma, but here as a pairing, there just doesn't seem to be that spark. It doesn't really feel like this is a relationship that Diana is prepared to give up basically everything else that she believes in for, no matter how much she says that it is. And because this central relationship doesn't land, failing to drive the film's main thematic angle, it means that small things become more of an issue than they would be otherwise. Things like Diana suddenly appearing in her Wonder Woman outfit in the road convoy sequence. These become things you notice rather than things that you just let wash over you. Having said that, there are still things to enjoy about the film. As mentioned, Gadot and Pine both have charisma, whilst Wiig and Pedro Pascal both have a ton of fun in their respective roles as the villains. Their larger-than-life performances helping to give the film the feeling of an older, fashioned comic book film. This is closer to the Superman films of the Reeves era rather than the grim dark of Nolan's Batman or Zack Snyder's DC outings. And that is not something to complain about. A reminder that a comic book movie can be bright colours and superheroes flying and larger than life villains is something that I'm all for. And whilst the effects are patchy at times, the action, as I mentioned, is often imaginatively staged, and there are some generally visually striking sequences in the film. If it had managed to land its central theme more assuredly, yes, it would have been a much better film. But as a fun, colourful adventure for a couple of hours, it's decent enough, although it could do with being roughly 20 minutes shorter. It's certainly not the disaster that many seem to be claiming that it is. You can't help but wonder that some of that is due to some of the gender politics raised by the film. After all, the comic book crowd, shall we say, can be a bit touchy on the subject. It's a colourful throwback outing for the most famous Amazon shy of Jeff Bezos. Let me know what you thought of Diana's latest adventure if you've watched it. Leave your comments below, and I'll be back again with you soon.